Really? Well. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, it's the end right now, so I'm pretty sure some people are like, All right. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us today. My name is Will Alveno, and you have actually signed up for our session on the ZAP complement to data integration. Basically, this is an introduction to using ZAPIER for those of you who are new to it or are thinking about it or have seen the name or you have come across a couple of situations where you have seen it shown. So that's basically what we're going to cover today, give you a few tips and how to use it, and of course we're going to go through an actual live demo of the application so that you can see how it works um, in the data integration side. um, I am actually the database administrator at Catholic Charities USA here in Alexandria, Virginia, and I have been working with nonprofits for over 30 years, so I probably have seen pretty much every possible permutation of a um, product that has been out there for the most time. I think I've seen, every evolution of products. So I am actually very excited about this conference because this will be probably the first time some people actually come to a conference where they actually had built things into Razor's Edge, which of course, if you were with a Razor's Edge crowd, even just 5 years ago, you wouldn't even be saying, "Oh, yeah, I have done stuff that I can actually build inside Razor's Edge," right? And we're able to do that, thanks to how the technology has evolved. Well, today you're going to get a bit of the, I will say, a third-party, version of things here with the Zapier implementations. I only have one thing to tell you about myself here in the Washington, D.C. area. Been working with nonprofits my whole life, basically. I just have to let you know that I do have a disability, and my visual disability does not really allow me to be very good at keeping track of messages and chat. So I will definitely have some time at the end of the session for a Q&A. But if you want to just pop your question inside the message, please feel free to do so, and we will be definitely looking forward to answer your questions. Again, we'll have some time at the end to do that. So I apologize in advance if I'm not able to address any immediate questions as they happen. I only have a couple of slides to show, so this is not going to be about too many slides. It's going to be short slides, to the point, and then we're going to just dive into the actual presentation. What we're going to cover today basically goes all the way from talking about, well, why is the reason why you will need to use a tool or service like Zapier, right? And of course, most of us are very excited about how Microsoft Power Automate and the entire platform works, and I consider myself a, not necessarily a power user, but I will say that I'm up there in the group of people who actually doesn't feel afraid to touch anything, in Microsoft Power Automate. However, I do understand that there are certain things that either a little bit complicated to do, or it requires a different, skill set level, for it to get it accomplished. So I usually go through the assessment of, is there anything else that we can use for this, right? And so I found that there is additional motivators, for why Power Automate is great about certain things, and then of course we can complement what we do with Power Automate with other things that we can have third-party vendors. So that's where I'm going to introduce ZAPIER as one of those solutions, right, that are out there, and I will give you some tips and project considerations that you should consider when you're doing your own implementations, or if you're evaluating, or you're in the discovery process of see if ZAPIER is something that you could use. We will spend some time on the demo. Well, I'll show you a couple of things that are part of the integrations, how you use ZAPIER, and we'll discuss some of the nuances about what you should know in advance, so that you're not caught in by surprise for certain things. And then at the end, I promise we will address those questions that you may have. Now, of course, we as I mentioned before, we do have an advantage of using Power Automate these days, and there's a lot of things it can do. Obviously, we're very excited to the fact that it's a growing product, it's a growing suite of services and tools that we can use. We can leverage pretty much everything that it's already there, and also we can leverage things that also happen to be probably in the neighborhood of things that we wouldn't do before, right? It required some level of I will say advanced knowledge of coding and things like that, right? So it's kind of really good that we are able to go to Microsoft Power Automate, create the workflow, and just like me here, I can not only create workflows, I can actually create a workflow, attach it to an actual application, and show it in Razor's Edge and XD, right? So you can see the advantages of that. Now, when you're working with Microsoft, when you are working with Microsoft Power Automate, you obviously gonna need to assess other applications, because of course it doesn't do everything, right, for everybody. And sometimes what happens is that even when it does just when it works for things, you sometimes find that there are certain limitations to what you can do, or probably maybe what you're trying to do is probably simpler than what Microsoft Power Automate wants to do, right? So there's reasons why you do that. So I will say that the very first things that you should do, right, when you are thinking about using ZAPIER, or even other applications similar to ZAPIER. ZAPIER happens to be one of the most popular out there, right? Think about what is that you're trying to accomplish with with your workflows and your applications, and what you're trying to accomplish on the front end as well, right? Now, we know, right, that the Power Platform, the Power Automated Platform, can do a lot of data transfers, give or take your access rights and everything. You basically are able to move data across systems very quickly, very easy, and with very little worry about, access or controls or security, right? Because it's all built into that. But some of us have found out that, there are certain things that it cannot do, and we're left right there at the door trying to figure out, whether we should, learn the skills, hire a consultant, right? And sometimes when we actually do our own evaluation, we think, well, maybe what we need is just something that just get the job done, right? I just want to move certain data, let's say from Razor's Edge to another system, right? But I want to be able to control what I do, and I want it to be simple, and I want something that if it doesn't work, I should be able to get, some kind of support. And definitely, I don't want this thing to cost me an arm and a leg, right? Because again, as you probably have known, especially if you have worked in data integrations before, if it can be a very expensive, proposition when you're talking about moving data back and forth between systems, right? So along comes Zapier, right? And so what does Zapier do? Well, Zapier has a whole bunch of different, you're welcome to visit their website. Obviously, I'm not here to sell you Zapier. I'm not a salesperson for Zapier, but definitely check them out. They have lots, if there is something Zapier has, is lots and lots and lots of resources and also nice, I will say videos and of course, the help system is actually very, very complex, but at the same time, very intuitive, right? But in a nutshell, basically what you would do with Zapier if you were willing to work with your data and you want your data to move from one system to another system, very quickly, sort of speaking, and of course at the same time being able to do it without having to, do heavy coding or things like that, then Zapier can help you with that. Zapier, you can create SAPs. They're called SAPs. Basically, your workflows technically are called SAPs. And your SAPs can be in auto mode, right? So you can basically just turn them on, and as long as there is a file with an update, the SAP will basically pick it up and do whatever you have instructed the SAP to do, right? And of course, it's a workflow as well, workflow environment. You will see it in a minute. You also can use Zapier as a way to do more on-demand data transfers. So for example, if you don't trust, let's say that it's not that you don't trust, but maybe you need to massage your data a little bit before you actually transfer the data, and you want to have that level of control. You can always have SAPs that are on demand, or basically you just turn it off and don't turn it on until you need it, right? So you actually are able to do that as well, and it lets you be that flexible. And there is also the other story. You can actually do bulk data transfers from one system to another, and again, all of this without you having to spend a gazillion hours on coding or APIs and API calls and all this other level of programming that sometimes it would be nice if I have the time to learn it, but I don't have the time, and I just need this data to move across, right? So that being said, I just want to briefly here cover what you should really do, before you get involved with Zapier, or if this is the tool for you, right? Always consider, what you do normally when you do any other data project, right? Always do your homework, okay? I always say, always do a needs assessment based on the frequency of what you're trying to do, and of course the data size, right? Because if we are trying to sync, or if you're trying to move data, 1,000 records, 2,000 records, that's not really a big deal. But if you're talking about moving 100,000 records or 1,000,000 records, on each transfer, then you have to understand that all of these technologies, Power Automate and Zapier, are still using the same concept of APIs, right? And APIs are not, they're queues technically, right? The data comes into that queue, and the queue is managed. And if you have 100,000 records or 1,000,000 records, then that's a completely different story. So you always have to think about what you're gonna do based on the assessment that you have. So some solutions that you may find out there will be probably best suited if your data is too big, right? If there is 1,000,000 records, 500,000 records, 20 different fields or 50 different fields. I don't have time to describe all of them, but you probably have been involved in any of those kinds of situations where you have to decide whether a product will fit your situation, right? Based on, how often you're going to use that thing, that product, that service, and of course, how big the data is. Also consider where your data is coming from, right? All the possible situations there. Of course, we're thinking that you're moving data from Razor's Edge to somewhere, right? So for example, I usually move data from Razor's Edge to my OneDrive. Well, not necessarily my OneDrive, but we move it to a shared drive. So we move data there, and then from there, we can then move data to other different applications that we have. Now, in the past, we used to do all of this via imports, right? We used to, download the data from Razor's Edge and then go to MailChimp and upload the data from there. Or, when we moved to a different platform, then we kept on doing the same thing. Now, of course, the only thing that we do is you drop the file in a share folder, and then, the Zapier picks it up, and then Zapier basically just sends the file over with the update that we need, for the next email campaign that we're going to have. So you also need to consider, when you're doing all of this, what are the sources, where your data is coming, and where is it going, and what is going to need as far as, for example, are you going to, are you going to be doing this in such a way that you may need your IT personnel to be involved because, there's some data access issues and things like that. So you need to do your homework in that area. And I know some nonprofits don't necessarily manage their own IT resources, right? So it's always important to do that. The pricing, I can always say, compared to the manual processes, for me has been totally 100% I will say, return on investment. I have spent, less time doing SAPs that I have spent my previous years doing import and exports out of Razor's Edge into the different systems. Even if I use, other tools like Importomatic or Importacular, right? I have found Microsoft Automate, Microsoft Power Automate, and of course, Zapier to be a lifesaver and a price cutting measure for a lot of the things that we do. Plus, I can teach these things to new personnel, and it makes it very easy for them to understand what they need to do, right? So another thing that I want you to understand out of all of this, if you decide to explore the possibility of using Zapier in your implementations, right? Always plot, in a big matrix, and usually a matrix for me is a big spreadsheet, right? Plot everything that you are going to do, what fields are going to move, what fields don't move, what fields are frequent, what fields are lengthy, right? What fields are always, static, right? Things like that. Always do your homework, plot, test, and of course, one of the things I always tell, always introduce a problem yourself, when you're doing your testing, because if you introduce a problem already, then of course it makes it very easy for you to find and troubleshoot later, right? And then after you figure out how you fix it, then do it again, break it again to see if you can, fix it. I have found after using the Zapier tool, for almost, I will say, 2 years already, I have found that if I do that, I usually am able to very quickly resolve issues if I have them, in the middle of an implementation. Okay. And of course, document everything, and you should record yourself every time that you do something. It will be a good idea to record because, again, when you're doing these things, in Power Automate or in Zapier, sometimes you do a lot of things and you don't realize that you may be losing the ability to go back and see what is or how you did it, right? So I usually, because of my disability, I usually tend to record everything. So probably maybe I'm overdoing it, but I always suggest that people do it in that way so that you are able to later go back and take notes and see what is that you did, and even create maybe your own, policies and procedures out of what you just did, right? Okay, so those are the main slides that I want to talk to you about. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to basically show you how this platform works, right? And again, I will be taking questions at the end. So hopefully, if you have questions, I will be doing that. And let me go ahead and share my screen where I will show you. Basically, I'll show you the different pieces to this whole demo so that you will see where do we stand in that. And of course, I'm using obviously fake data, right? Using this, and I am using technically, one of the products that I'm using actually is using a free account. So it does have an issue where I may be delay in some of the presentation. So that's what I wanted to kind of finish this very early, so that if we have to wait for the update to actually happen, at least you're able to see that it worked, right? I want to be able to, to go to do the what is it, the aha moment, right, of the presentation, and hopefully it's not a boo-hoo, right, moment. So I'll show you the different things that we're going to use in my presentation here on the demo, because obviously we're going to be accessing a couple of things. So the first thing that I want to show you is my OneDrive, right, in my Microsoft Office. So I have a file, and again, obviously, I'm showing you a demo area of my OneDrive, but this area is not anything different from the other areas that I have, where files get dropped right in those folders. And of course, from that folder, that particular file is being pushed right from the OneDrive over to the whatever application I need it on. Right, I'm going to show you the application I'm going to use in this case, and then of course after that, I can basically just let the system do it on their own, and I just leave it unattended. Right, I can totally 100% stop anything and basically just regroup, so to speak, and put it in manual if I need to, right? But in most at this point in time, after using it for almost 2 years already, I feel very comfortable about certain things. So it's very few times where I have to actually stop the processes. They usually work on their own very well. The other area that I'm going to show you is the application where I'm going to send this, right? So I have some of you have MailChimp, some of you have Constant Contact. So I have an active campaign account, right? And so this is where the data is going to be coming, right? This is the end destination of my data. Again, in the olden days, I used to do imports and exports and things like that. And of course, I had to always, that whole process take a few minutes to do after a while. But the fact that now I can do it almost in autopilot saves me a lot of time, right? At the same time that I'm actually providing probably the best updates to my data. And last but not least, I'm going to also share my ZAP application. And in ZAP, basically what you have is an environment where you build workflows. It's exactly in the same way that you guys will do a Power Automate workflow. Very similar here, how you do the workflows. Of course, it has other lingo and it has other, a different kind of interface, how you do it. But think about it almost like a workflow, and your SAPs basically execute that workflow with all the steps that whatever you need in that workflow. And then, of course, you have control over whether you can see the history, how it happened, things like that. Almost the same way that you can actually see the history of your workflows in Power Automate, right? Okay, so those are the tools that we're going to be using for this demonstration. And what I will do is basically I'll go ahead and do one example from end to end, and so show you the whole process. Again, if you have a question about how I did, or how all of this I'm doing right now live. So technically I'm not, not pulling anything out of my sleeve. It's basically everything is live as is. And obviously you probably will do your own testing. And I will say that there are other layers to this that I'm not discussing here, obviously, because obviously each organization may have different layers to that. Like, for example, how do you get to access, ZAPIER? How do you allow your users to access it? That will be something that will be a discussion that obviously is not the same for everybody, right? Also, are there processes on how you get your data into your OneDrive or your shared drive? Or does it have to be that, right? Remember, I'm using my OneDrive because it's the best example, the simplest example that I can use. But I have done this also for mailing houses, right? So where we drop a file in a mailing house, or an FTP server, if you still use some of those, right? We have done that as well. So there's several applications to this. I'm using the simplest so that you can see that it's really, it doesn't require a lot of coding. It doesn't require a lot of things to do. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. This time I'm going to try to share everything. I should be able to. So I'm sharing my study screen so that you guys can see the entire process from end to end, right? So I'm gonna start my process where I usually start things. That will be in the file that needs to be moved, right? Well, the file that I need to move has had an update. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add those updates to the file. So I'm going to add two more names here, right? I'm going to add Amy Ramos at my org, that org. And she gave me a gift of $1,000. And I also have Bob Sample, and good old Bob Sample. Good old Sample. Gave me on the 1st of June $300. And this is my file. And the only thing that I'm doing here is normally what the service will do. Whatever service I use to dump this file in here, right, will drop it. You know, I, for example, the other day had a situation where I have raffle and ticket sales, and they were dropping the file basically every night. And then the next day, I had to send an email out, right, to people explaining some of the rules and things like that. So the file will be there already updated. So now that I have the file in place, I already have a ZAP that is turned on basically to take that data and move it to the application on the end, right, on the end side, which is Active Campaign, which is the one that I'm going to use to send my emails, right? So I should see an update to this basically in a few minutes. There should be an update to this. But I also wanted to show you, while we wait for that update to happen, I also wanted to show you that when I am in the particular SAP application, I can actually see the history of it. I can see how basically this SAP has behaved over time, because obviously not all the time maybe your file is correct, right? So for example, you know, I can see here where it has successfully run, and I can see also when it has not, right? And of course, I can also go and see what was the problem. And usually the problem is related to things that I should already know what the problem is, but I probably have, you know, misjudged the step. And of course, I was able to resend the file properly after, you know, after a while. I will actually show you exactly what happens when I do an actual SAP from scratch. So you will actually get to see a bit of that as well in this demo. And of course, there's a couple of things that you need to understand about how SAPs work, right? The SAP itself, I'm going to show you. I'm going to open one so that you can see how it looks, right? And this will probably not be extremely strange for some of you, especially if you already dealt with, you know, with Power Automate. It looks basically almost just like a workflow environment where you, of course, you know, will be able to edit, right, this particular flow, just like you know, basically edit a workflow on Power Automate, and basically instruct this to do whatever it needs to do. Right now, of course, I'm using it, so I'm trying not to I'm supposed to be able to get out. There you go. All right. So I will go and see now if I have an update to my third-party application. And as you probably can see, there were 2 records in this particular list that I'm trying to update in ActiveCampaign, but now I have 4 records. And I can see that the 2 records that were newly updated or added to the list is Amy Ramos and Bob Sample, right? I can go now, I can show you now in ZAPIER, I can show you basically the history, and you will see in the history, you will be able to appreciate, right, exactly what happened. And obviously, I can say that there was not a problem because obviously there's no errors being pulled for this. And this is basically how a automatic ZAP will work. The file gets updated, right? ZAPIER picks up the update, and my application gets the update a few minutes later. So all of this process took pretty much about 5 minutes. As I was explaining the other areas, took 5 minutes for all of that to complete. And again, I always say, always do an assessment. You know, if you're thinking about using tools like this, think about the size of your data, because obviously I get very excited when I use tools like this, but of course I not use it for everything, right? Because again, sometimes what you will probably need to do is just to do a regular data transfer, which of course ZAPIER can do. Now I'm gonna try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. I'm gonna try to show you both the creation of an actual ZAP, right? At the same time that I show you how we actually do a data transfer, right? An actual data transfer that we control, that is not on a sync mode, it's not on an ongoing basis, but I control that data transfer because maybe it's part of a I don't know, maybe it's part of a migration, right? Or my first migration of the data to the particular system that I'm, you know, connecting to. So I will go to my bulk file here that I created already, right? I just want to make sure that the bulk file contains whatever it needs to contain, right? It has the 4 different things here. So I know that there are 4, you know, they dropped the file on me. The only thing I know is that there are 4 records in it that, you know, would be added to my database on this side of the story. So right now, that area, it says that there's 0 records in my bulk mailing application. So I want to send an email tomorrow to all of these people, but it seems like there's nobody in the list right now so far, right? But I want that list to be updated immediately as I push that data. Now, of course, in order to do that, I need to create a ZAP for that. Now, because of course, this is how, you know, I say intuitive ZAPs are, I can actually, since I already have a ZAP that does an actual synchronization between the 2, I can basically just duplicate that particular ZAP and give it a, you know, a different name. In this case, I'm going to call it ZAP bulk. I just refresh my screen. And I'm going to basically change the behavior of this ZAP. And this is, again, the part that I actually like a lot about this, because, again, it doesn't require that I know coding, APIs, or anything like that. Well, of course, originally I had to put my API key in here, but it doesn't require that I do any specific, you know, any specific coding myself. So, for example, I want this particular ZAP to update the bulk list that I just saw earlier, a couple of minutes ago. So I'm going to pick that file. And because each file can have a different tab, I want to make sure that it picks up the correct tab. I can already test to see if the data will transfer properly, or, you know, will pick up the correct data. And of course, I can also now access the receiving application, in this case is Active Campaign, and I can make sure that it goes to the proper account in Active Campaign and that the fields are probably correct. Now, this is not going to my regular list. This is going to my bulk list. So I'm going to pick here what list is going. And you will see here that all my fields have been mapped because my previous SAP that I had actually was the one that had the information in it. So I know that it has been, coded properly, right? So there's my file there. And I can click continue. And then I can basically just publish it. All right. So now that the actual publishing happened, I can, this actually is on already right now. So the only thing that I have to make sure of, obviously, I just look at my file. And basically, I will just wait for the update to happen. Now, while I'm doing this waiting, you probably noticed that it was very easy for me to pick up a SAP that was already there, right? It's already moving the fields that I want. It's already updating the data that I want. And then, of course, now I'm using a copy of that SAP, and I'm going to use it for basic, update of data. So when I go to the actual SAP, I can turn the SAP off, right? And there is actually an option here where I can turn it back on, and I can do a data transfer, right? And in the data transfer, I get to basically, the advantage with the data transfer is that I actually can decide which of the records I want to update, or if I want to update all of them. So it gives me the ability to pick records, which with a regular SAP I wouldn't be able to do, because regular SAPs technically will send the data over on the schedule, right? And the schedule basically means whatever the SAP schedule is, depending on the pricing scheme that you buy, right? If you, right now when I'm a free account, usually free accounts don't get privilege, to move data across. So hopefully my SAP will work this time, hopefully, right? And now that I'm doing the update, it should, it should put me in the queue pretty quick and see what happens. If it doesn't update immediately, I will, wait a couple of seconds more and, and probably just refresh it. But right now it should work. Let me see if it's on. Oh, sorry, I supposed to hit send data. Yeah, you're always supposed to hit the send data button. Don't forget to do that, especially if you're doing it on an on-demand basis. So, and again, this was, in a scale from 1 to 10, right? Extremely very easy for me to do. Not today, but it was extremely easy for me to do the first time I actually did it, right? Because again, it didn't require for me to know any specific language, any specific coding. The only thing I had to know though was, where the files were. I did use naming conventions, and of course, those of us that work in data, we already know that naming conventions are very important things that we should do. And of course, always make sure that, that you keep that naming convention and you keep on using it until you have, a very good plan on how you're doing things. And as you can see now, my bulk mail list is ready. Next morning, my email is going to go out, right, to all these people that bought the ticket or whatever it is that they did, right? It's already here. It's already updated with a basically push of the button here. So I can do, on demand, I can do automatic, I can do data transfers, right, of data that I need to move across systems. I use these two applications, Microsoft Office, basically, OneDrive, and my Active Campaign. But basically, you can do pretty much any other application. And ZAPIER has thousands of connectors that you can use. Some applications are already there, so you don't have to actually physically build them. Some you can actually build. You can build custom SAPs, right? It will require, of course, a little bit more knowledge on the different steps that it has to take, but you will be able to do them fairly quick and easy, in comparison, of course, to some of what you will have to do in Microsoft Power Automate. Not that, again, Power Automate obviously has its advantages over things. I just found that some of the ZAPIER implementations for me have been lifesavers, and they actually do the job. All right, that being said, I will stop sharing things, and I will then go back to see if there are any questions, and you let me know. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go stick around for the next 5 minutes or so, even after. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. I do have my email address. I'll basically share that on. I think it says already on my presentation, but I'll basically just share it here from my presentation. You see it? Feel free to send me any email if you feel that you need some help, getting you started, right? Or visit the Facebook Razor's Edge group, right? We're very active there, and we're very always happy to answer any questions then. Thank you again for attending. Again, I'm going to stay here until 4:30. See if any other questions. Thank you again. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Bo. Oh, he can hear me? Okay. Oh, okay. So Bob, yes, you can basically mix data. As a matter of fact, you actually can mix in a SAP data from different files and basically merge it into the one application that you want to update. Okay. Okay, Ed. So yes, I use this as a complement tool to Power Automate, because of course, there are some Power Automate flows that I cannot build for a whole bunch of reasons. In my own environment, I cannot build them because of certain security or data access reasons, right? So I cannot do certain things. So what I usually do is I have Razor's Edge dump the data basically on one of my servers, files and FTPs, depending on what I'm doing. I have several applications that I do, so I usually use many of them. I also have the queue model, which of course, with that module, I can also dump certain queries and exports into my share folder. And if I have the ability to go across all of the other applications, basically I will connect them together. It looks to everybody that I'm actually doing it directly from Razor's Edge, but I'm not. I'm actually using probably 3 different tools at the same time, right? But yes, I'm able to actually complement the use of Zapier with whatever I do. Specifically right now, where I'm using it as an example to update my email system, right, which is a complete 30 application. And the file that I get from Razor's Edge basically comes from NXT, right, and gets dumped into my share folder. Okay. Thank you. I wonder what you use to record your process. I just basically record myself. To record the process, I record myself either on a Zoom or on Teams, but basically I do always record my sessions my personal um, resources and everything that I do, I record so that I can later check back and take notes from it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. All right. Should I leave the stage and go backstage? Okay.